Hello, I am Elizabeth, a domestic violence counselor and advocate from Connections for Abused Women and Children, or CAWC. This is CAN TV's Hotline 21, and for the next 25 minutes or so, I will be talking about domestic violence and the work that I do with Connections for Abused Women and Children. This is a live interactive show, and you can call in to ask questions and participate in the discussion at 312-738-1060. I'm a counselor with CAWC in their Hospital Crisis Intervention Program, or HCIP. This program is located at John Stroger Hospital and Northwestern Memorial Hospital. The goals of HCIP are 1, to provide quality on-site crisis intervention and counseling to domestic violence survivors at the moment they look for medical care. 2, to train healthcare providers to identify, assess, and effectively refer victims of abuse. And 3, to improve healthcare's response to domestic violence victims through training and outreach. CAWC as an organization has many other services, including counseling, shelter, legal advocacy, children's services, and support groups. To learn more information about our services, you can visit our website at cawc.org, and I'm going to put that on the screen right now. So here's our website, CAWC, and you can see here this is our shelter number under the Need Immediate Help. If you're in crisis, there is somebody available 24 hours a day to provide support and share resources. Advocates are always available to talk, provide information, and connect you with services. Our main office is located in the Humboldt Park area, and you can find more information on our website about different services. If you're ever interested in volunteering, that information is on there as well. Today I'm going to be talking about domestic violence. I'm going to be describing what domestic violence relationships look like and how to best support survivors in this situation. And so we're going to start by defining domestic violence. DV is a pattern of coercive behavior in any relationship that is used by one person to gain or maintain power and control over another. Domestic violence can be physical, sexual, emotional, economic, or psychological actions or threats of actions that influence another person. This includes behaviors that intimidate, manipulate, humiliate, isolate, coerce, threaten, blame, or hurt someone. So this encapsulates a huge range of behaviors. A lot of people think that abuse is only physical, and we see, though, in our work that abuse can take many different forms in the relationship. Often I've seen with my clients that the emotional and psychological forms of abuse can cause the most long-lasting harm for clients. I'm going to put up a tool I use with clients called the Power and Control Wheel, and this wheel illustrates the many forms abuse can take. So we see, actually, I'm sorry, I can put that up on the web. So we see in this Power and Control Wheel, I'm going to zoom out here because it's pretty zoomed in, that there are many different forms of abuse that we can see. Now it's a little hard to see. I apologize. And so we see things on here like coercion and threats or intimidation, emotional abuse, isolation, minimizing, denying, and blaming. And so we know relationship violence is a combination of a number of different tactics of abuse that are used to maintain power and control, which we see in the center of this circle. The center is surrounded by those different sets of behaviors I was just listing that an abusive partner uses in order to maintain this power and control. A lot of these behaviors can feel subtle and normal and are often unrecognizable until you look at the wheel in this way. Many of these can be happening at any one time, all as a way to enforce power within the relationship. Think of the wheel as a diagram of tactics an abusive partner uses to keep someone within a relationship. We see, I'm going to go back to the wheel now. We see within the wheel sort of subtle and continual behaviors that may exist within the whole framework of a relationship. And then we see this outer ring here that says the physical and sexual violence. These are the abusive acts that are more overt and forceful, and often the intense acts that reinforce the regular use of the other, subtler methods of abuse. You can see that there are many different types of abuse displayed here. I want to highlight a few that many people may not think of when you think of abuse in a relationship. Economic abuse and control is a huge issue that I see in my clients' relationships. Economic abuse often leads to clients becoming economically dependent on their abusers, which makes it so difficult for them to leave the relationship. A lot of times, abusers encourage their partners not to have a job because they want to take care of them, which at the start can sound romantic until the survivor has no financial resources independent of their partner and is unable to leave the relationship because of that economic pressure. I also see this economic manipulation in a lot of my clients who are concerned about making the abuser angry through leaving the relationship or filing for an order of protection. They're concerned about the abuser coming to their job and putting their financial security at risk. We also see this in other ways, like the abuser paying for their cell phone bill or other bills and having access to their partner's personal and financial information. Another complicated form of power and control in these relationships is the abuser isolating their partner from other forms of support. So many of the people I work with tell me that they have no one in their lives they could turn to for support, and they feel really stuck in this relationship because they have no one to talk to and nowhere to go. A lot of times this is related to clients feeling shame about being in an abusive relationship and not feeling like their friends or family would understand what they're going through and feeling unable to talk about it. Abusers often also distance their partners from friends or family, wanting their partner to be completely dependent on them. And with a lot of these power and control relationships, we see how it's kind of a continuum where behaviors that exist at the beginning of a relationship may become more serious and controlling as the relationship goes on. So with isolation, the idea that abusive partner may encourage the survivor to only hang out with them at the beginning of a relationship, which can feel romantic and special, until then when the partner tries to go see their friends or family and the abuser actively keeps them from doing that. I use this wheel as a way to show the clients I work with the many different forms abuse can take. When I meet with someone, it's very common for them to downplay their experience or say that it's not that bad if their abuser doesn't use physical violence. The wheel can help them see the different tactics their abuser may be using in the relationship, since sometimes it can be hard to identify behavior that is controlling and potentially abusive. You're currently watching Hotline 21 on CAN TV. I'm Elizabeth, a domestic violence counselor and advocate from Connections for Abused Women and Children. And today we're talking about domestic violence and what that looks like in a relationship. This is an interactive call-in show. You can call it at any time, and the number is 312-738-1060. If you're just joining us, I'm going to put up my organization's website again on the computer and on the screen, and so you know how you can access help. This is a website for our organization, cawc.org, and our hotline number there is 773-278-4566. This is a 24-hour emergency hotline. If you ever need assistance, you can call, and there's an advocate available to speak with you. I'm now going to put up some statistics on the prevalence of domestic violence in the United States. This information comes from the Center for Disease Control's 2015 National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey. The CDC conducts this survey regularly to assess the prevalence and severity of intimate partner violence in the total U.S. population. I'm going to put that up on the overhead screen right now. So this might be slightly difficult to see, and I apologize, I will not leave it up for too long. So this top figure here is the lifetime prevalence of physical, sexual, and stalking violence by an intimate partner for women. This top number here shows the total combined experience of that abuse in the United States for women, 36.4%. This bottom's chart here is for the experience of physical, sexual, and stalking violence towards men. The top number here is that aggregate percentage at 33.6%. I think it's really important to see how common abuse is for both men and women. I think there are a lot of barriers to men receiving services, including sort of extreme shame about it and thinking that domestic violence is only an issue that women experience. And so recognizing that men are also very impacted by DV is really important for us to sort of become more aware and more able to combat this issue. This third line here for both is the stalking prevalence. And I just want to describe sort of how the CDC defines stalking. So they measured stalking tactics including unwanted phone contact, unwanted electronic contact, showing up uninvited to places like the victim's home or work, sneaking into the victim's home, and sort of letting them know that they were there. So maybe moving something around or leaving something behind so the victim knew that someone had broken into their space. The CDC defines stalking as experiencing multiple of these tactics, or one of those tactics multiple times. So like receiving multiple unwanted phone calls, or receiving a phone call, a text, an email, multiple tactics like that. They also required that the victim felt fearful or believed that they would be harmed. I want to go back to the statistics just so you can see here. Women experience stalking at a rate of 10.4%, and only 2.2% of men have experienced stalking in their lifetime by an intimate partner. And I do think that it's important to note the just sort of discrepancy there. I think a lot of the other percentages are a little bit closer, although we do see that again with sexual violence here, because that's the second there. And so just noting that women do experience both stalking and sexual violence more often than men do. And then the CDC breaks up physical violence into experiencing severe physical violence and being slapped, pushed, or shoved. And the CDC defines severe physical violence as being hit with a fist, kicked, slammed against something, being choked or suffocated, and using a knife or gun. I'm just going to go back to the overhead again for a second. We see for women up here that sort of distinction between severe physical violence and the sort of less severe physical violence, and then the same thing down here for men. I also wanted to just note they did measure psychological abuse as well. 36.4% of women and 34.2% of men have experienced psychological aggression by an intimate partner during their lifetime. Psychological aggression includes what they call expressive aggression, so insulting, humiliating, or being made fun of in front of others, and then coercive control, which is sort of that thing that we talked about recently with the power and control wheel, and that includes financial control, being kept from seeing family or friends, monitoring location, and threatening to physically harm. And so I do just want to note that those numbers mirror the experience of physical, sexual, and stalking violence as well. And so we see that men and women are both experiencing this at pretty high numbers. It's more than a third for both psychological abuse and physical abuse. I wanted to go over these statistics because I think it's really important to see how incredibly common domestic violence is in our country. More than a third of all women experience DV in their lifetime, and about a third of men do. So many of us know a survivor or are a survivor, and so just recognizing that can help you be more aware and maybe reach out to people in your life that might be experiencing this. You're currently watching Hotline 21 on CAN TV. I'm Elizabeth, a domestic violence advocate from Connections for Abused Women and Children, and today we're talking about domestic violence and what that looks like in relationships. Please feel free to call in and join the conversation by calling 312-738-1060. I'm happy to take any questions or comments and really make this an engaging discussion if you're watching. As an advocate in the healthcare setting, I talk a lot to my clients and the medical staff that I work with about the relationship between domestic violence and health. We can see direct relationships between DV and physical and mental health, and it's really important for both clients and medical staff to be aware of that. With the program that I'm involved in, HCIP, we really want to make the healthcare setting a place where people are getting connected with services. We know it can be a safe place for someone to come, kind of a neutral space for them to come and speak about it and talk to their doctor, which is someone usually that you trust. And so we really want to make sure the healthcare setting is being responsive to the needs of DV survivors. We see that DV is related to maternal health in pretty concerning ways. Women in intimate partner violence relationships are at an increased risk for rapid, repeat, and unintended pregnancy. There's also increased incidence of low birth weight babies, preterm birth, and miscarriages for women in domestic violence relationships. We see that DV often starts or intensifies during pregnancy, and this can be related to a lot of these negative birth outcomes. Our program works a lot with pregnant and parenting moms, as well as the doctors and social workers who work with that population. And so we spend a lot of time discussing safety and providing support during this really critical time. Another huge health issue related to DV is traumatic brain injury. 71% of women experiencing intimate partner violence have incurred a TBI due to a physical assault. And I will say that I'm going to cite some statistics here, but there is sort of a lack of comprehensive information on this subject. A lot of these studies have been quite small, and there's really a need for us to learn more information about the impact of DV and traumatic brain injury on survivors. Many survivors experience multiple mild and untreated TBIs in the course of their abuse. Strangulation is one of the most common forms of traumatic brain injury that survivors experience, but other common forms of TBI are blunt force blows to the head, like if a survivor has their head banged against a wall, or if they're shaken so hard that their brain hits the wall of their skull. And strangulation related to TBI is a really common form of physical violence, and one that we see is particularly controlling in abusive relationships, and it is often repeated. As an advocate, if someone mentions strangulation to me, we are aware that that raises huge red flags about the potential danger of the situation. We do know that more than 2/3 of IPV victims are strangled at least once. And it can really be normalized by survivors in relationships because it can be very common, and they're not always immediate physical repercussions. So there may not be marks on the neck or, sort of any feeling or injury there. And so a lot of times survivors aren't seeking medical help after they've been strangled, although even if you're blocking off airway to the brain, that does result in a TBI. And we know that traumatic brain injury has a real impact on physical and mental health, including decreased concentration, reduced attention span, short-term and long-term memory loss, difficulty learning new information, increased aggression and/or anxiety, and difficulty sleeping. And it's really important to note that a lot of those sort of impacts or results of TBI make it difficult to work with survivors and can make it difficult for them to be believed if they're having memory issues, or if their emotional regulation is a little off, or they're just having trouble focusing or sleeping, or just not being if they're, aggressive or anxious. All of those things make it really challenging to work with survivors, and I think recognizing that this is coming from this traumatic brain injury can really help clarify what's going on, and also maybe improve our response to domestic violence survivors. Traumatic brain injury is a really big issue that we're just kind of starting to understand in relation to intimate partner violence and how it's affecting long-term health outcomes. Like I mentioned, there are not a lot of comprehensive studies. I think a lot of the information about TBI that we have out there right now is related to sports injury. And so I think the fact that people are starting to recognize the relationship between intimate partner violence and TBI hopefully will lead to a greater understanding of it and how it's impacting survivors in these relationships. You are currently watching Hotline 21 on CAN TV. I'm Elizabeth, I'm a domestic violence advocate for Connections for Abused Women and Children, and today we're talking about domestic violence and what that looks like in relationships. Please feel free to call in and join the conversation. The number is at the bottom of your screen, but it's 312-738-1060. I now want to sort of shift into talking about how you can support someone, a friend or family member who may be in an abusive relationship. As we've discussed, it is very common in our population, and so I think recognizing how to respond or reach out to somebody in that relationship is really important for all of us to understand. Abusers tend to isolate their partners and make them feel like they can't talk to anyone about the abuse, so checking in with friends can be a really powerful way to disrupt the cycle of abuse. There are certain warning signs a friend or family member may be in an abusive relationship. If you see their partner putting them down in front of others, if you notice their partner is extremely jealous or possessive and that your friend is constantly worried about making their partner upset, if you notice physical marks or injuries, or if you notice that they've stopped spending time with friends or family. These are potential red flags that they're in an abusive relationship and should maybe clue you in to just be a little more sort of noticing what's going on and checking in with your friend or family. If someone discloses to you that they are in an abusive relationship, the most important thing you can do is believe them and listen to their experience in a non-judgmental way. I think one of the big concerns that my clients have is that if they disclose abuse, they will not be believed. And so immediately believing them and reassuring them that you are there for them to talk can be a huge sort of relief for them when they're disclosing maybe for the first time, especially because a lot of times Abusers are really good at being charming in front of other people, and so nobody but the survivor may have ever seen them in an abusive situation. So just recognizing that your experience with their abuser may be different than theirs, and understanding that they're coming to you and believing them is a huge first step. I think that just letting them know the abuse is not their fault and that you are there for them to support them in whatever ways they need. There can be a tendency to want to sort of fix the problem or immediately come up with ideas or solutions. And I think just really trying to listen and let the survivor share their experience is really powerful. And also let them sort of talk to you about what they want to do rather than you jumping in and trying to solve this situation. It's really important to be non-judgmental. Survivors often feel a lot of shame and guilt from being in the situation. I hear from a lot of my clients how kind of stupid they feel because they fell for this man and are in this relationship. And so just letting them know that there's nothing to be ashamed about, that they're not at fault for being in this abusive relationship is really powerful to hear from their friends and family. Make sure they know you respect the choices they make, especially if they don't leave the relationship or if they go back to their abuser. Leaving an abusive relationship is incredibly challenging, and as a support for the survivor, make sure they can always talk to you even if they feel like what they're doing isn't what you want them to be doing. Don't make your support conditional on the survivor leaving the relationship. That can be a really dangerous time for the survivor, and recognizing that she is kind of the expert of her safety in this situation is a really important thing. Talk to the survivor about their safety plan and help them develop one. The National Domestic Violence Hotline website has a lot of helpful information on creating a safety plan. You also can always call our hotline, the CWC hotline, which I will put up again at the end, or the Illinois State Hotline, and they can talk to you about safety and safety planning ideas. But things like having your friend have copies of important documents or a packed bag at your house in an emergency are just some first steps you could take. Encourage them to reach out to a domestic violence agency for support. The Illinois DV hotline has information about the many programs and organizations in the state like CAWC, and offer to go with them to an agency or if they want to file a police report or an order of protection. A lot of people, this may be their first time experiencing something like this, and they're scared to seek help or don't know what the process is and just feel alone. So letting them know that they have someone to walk through with them can be valuable. That's a lot of my work too as an advocate, is just providing support and helping to sort of guide them through these strange processes. And as we've seen today, domestic violence is incredibly common. If you or someone you know is in an abusive relationship, please know you are not alone and help is available. So I'm going to put up the contact information again for my agency, CAWC, including our 24-hour hotline. And this is our website again, cawc.org, and we see in the corner a hotline information, 773-278-4566. That is a 24-hour crisis hotline, and you can reach an advocate there any hour if you need help or information or just additional support. Thank you so much for watching and participating in today's show. My name is Elizabeth. I'm an advocate at CAWC in the Hospital Crisis Intervention Project at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. This is CAN TV's Hotline 21. Thank you and have a good night.